Yeah, very nice to meet you, Brett. And so, just wondering about your role there at AT.
I'm the Chief Executive of Auckland Tourism Events and Economic Development, and events like today are really critical for the future growth of the Auckland economy.
Absolutely, I'd agree with you 100%. I was just what are some of the key reasons why, in your opinion, that would be the case?
Well, I think, what we need to do in Auckland is we know that we've got the inventiveness here, and actually we've also got quite a bit of innovation, but it's actually getting companies together and looking at how we get them offshore as early as possible. So I think hearing so many good stories today from companies that have been successful is really critical, inspiring other people that it is possible. It's hard work as an entrepreneur when you're in a country like New Zealand, a long way from other markets. But today, I think there'll be some people walking out of here with their shoulders back, feeling like it is possible.
There are certainly some very inspirational speakers here today that trying to convey those key messages. What, in your opinion, were some of the best points that that people had brought across in terms of trying to get business offshore and overseas?
Well, look, I think one of the key points is not to be dismayed by setbacks. So yes, being successful requires a lot of brain power, but it also requires a fair bit of passion. And I thought Vinny in the last session today really summed it up when he said, we make a lot of decisions from the brain, but ultimately, you've really got to be passionate about it. And if you can retain that passion, you'll be successful.
Absolutely. Vinny was a great speaker today. A lot of very good points, but for someone of his age, but also peppered it with a great deal of humour. What do you think, in your opinion, are some of the key qualities that New Zealanders need to have in order to be successful?
I think partnering is a really important attribute. I mean, for a lot of companies in New Zealand, they develop. They can develop quite quickly and be quite successful here without necessarily partnering. But I think once you get into that big offshore market, it's recognising that to scale, you need to be able to partner, and collaboration is a really important part of that. Distribution models in New Zealand tend to be pretty simple. You get out onto the global stage and distribution becomes a whole lot more complex. The good news for those companies is that there are a lot of people in New Zealand now with the experience to be able to help with that, because they've done it themselves. There's also a lot of multinationals here in areas like ICT and health that they're also happy to help aspiring companies and entrepreneurs with that. So I think the help is there if people are willing to look for it, but it is about recognising that the global market is very different to New Zealand.
Yeah, especially given the visual demonstration that Vinny said about the Indian market, and his description there is, for someone who is Indian saying that about that market, what sort of hurdles and challenges do you think that faces for a Kiwi who's looking to enter a market like that?
Well, I think that I was talking to Vinny afterwards, and one of the things that Kiwis are very good at is the personal connections, and you find there are a lot of good personal networks. And I was able to give him a contact of mine who was in that, who was already in that market. So I think one of the things before you get offshore is get around your networks in New Zealand, understand who's been in that market before, who's had contacts, use the diaspora, talk to Kia, talk to the organisations that have got good contacts, and build up that before you get on the plane. Because once you get on the plane and once you get there, a market like India, and I spent a bit of time there doing business myself, it's overwhelming. It's just, and the same can be said for China and Brazil and Russia, these other emerging markets, Indonesia is another. So try and gather as much information here as you can before you leap off, because I think it's always good to start into those markets with a few established contacts. Who can you trust? Who's worked with New Zealand companies before? Who can actually really give you some really frank advice rather than having to learn the hard way?
Just one more question. That was one of the themes from today was that you should have a narrow focus to start with, go deep, and focus on the local market before taking your product overseas. Test it here first. Do you think as New Zealanders we're lucky to have that opportunity to be able to test it in a smaller market before we take it overseas?
I think we are. I mean, I think one of the great things about New Zealand is because we are such a multicultural society, you do have the opportunity of actually if you're looking at the China market or the India market, you've actually got the opportunity to engage with a pretty significant base of Chinese customers or Indian customers here in New Zealand. I think that's important, though I will say this is a very fast-moving world. So that test phase increasingly has got to be pretty short, because you've got to get out into that market as soon as possible. But yeah, I think they are good opportunities, and I think there's probably a lot more world-leading technology around in New Zealand than most companies would realise. One of the things that we're looking at doing at AT is making sure that the big New Zealand companies that have scale and have the ability to trial some of this technology can actually get engaged with it early, because there aren't that many large companies in New Zealand these days. So, giving the opportunity to an emerging company to really stress test their product in a truly corporate environment, the sort of corporate they're going to encounter in the US or elsewhere, I think is really important, because there are all sorts of different layers of approvals and that you're going to get in a large company than you're going to get here. And I see a lot of the successful technology companies are successful because they have someone in the senior management team who's maybe worked in a multinational environment before and understands that. So that's an area where we think we can help.
Fantastic, very good advice there, Brett, and very nice to meet you. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.